Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kiev. We had lots of very interesting updates. More than 73% of Ukrainians support immediate peace negotiations leading to a compromise solution, according to a survey by the public organization Advanced Legal Initiatives. So the Ukrainians were asked several questions. The first one was the war before the border crossing of 1991 or immediate peace leading to a compromise solution, and 73% decided a peace leading to a compromise solution. The Ukrainians are very tired, but the situation is very difficult. For example, these days we received updates that the future American administration of President-elect Donald Trump insists on lowering the age of mobilization in Ukraine to 18 years. But you need to understand, we must understand the difference between the Biden's administration and Trump's administration. When, for example, talking about Biden's administration, the main purpose of their insists on the lowering of the age of mobilization was to continue the war, to continue the special military operation. As for the Trumps, there might be completely different goals in this lowering the age, but Trump's administration most likely currently see that Ukrainians suffer significant losses, that most likely they will not be able to hold their lines. So that's why they're trying to force Kiev and Zelensky to lower the mobilization age, just with one purpose: to hold the positions during the negotiation process. This is very important because negotiations, even if they start, it will take obviously several months, maybe up to a year, to finalize the papers and to sign documents. And obviously during this year, during this period of time, everything can be changed along the line of combat contact, and every time something changes along the line of combat contact, the negotiation process should start from the beginning. So that's why the Ukrainians need people, the Ukraine needs people along the line of combat contact just to stabilize the process. Now let's discuss the situation and how the things were developing. For example, let's continue our topic about the Sumy direction. If you remember, yesterday we were talking that the Russians managed to cross the border and to take under control several tree lines on the Ukrainian side of the Sumy region, and we were guessing whether the Russians are preparing themselves before the beginning of another offensive operation in the direction of Yunakivka, or those were just maneuvers. Today we start receiving additional details about the situation in this area, and the Russian military experts are saying that the Russians indeed managed to cross the border in the vicinity of Uspienovka, and currently the Russians are advancing in the direction of Zhuravka. The Russians are saying that the main purpose of this maneuver is to outflank the Ukrainian positions in the village of Nikolaeva-Darina. I'll remind you that during the previous months the Russians made lots of attempts to attack the village of Nikolaeva-Darina, but most of those attacks were repelled by the Ukrainians. The Russians suffered losses and they stopped any attempts in the future with the purpose to find another solution, and most likely this is exactly the solution. First they will attack Zhuravka, then they will try to cross the river of Snagast in the area of Zhuravka, and then the Russians will try to attack Nikolaeva-Darina from behind, and then from these positions the Russians will continue moving further in the direction of Sverdlikova. So at least Russian military experts are telling us about these plans and this offensive operation. Now let's move further. As for the Kupinsk direction, during the previous 12 hours we haven't received anything special. Now let's discuss the situation in the city of Chasiv Yar. If you remember, yesterday we were talking that pro-Ukrainian sources, Deep State was preparing, let's say, major updates in the area of the city of Chasiv Yar. We were expecting that the pro-Ukrainian sources will color more territories in Russian favor. Today they published their updates, and according to pro-Ukrainian sources, almost the entire northern part of the city of Chasiv Yar was taken by the Russians during the previous several days as a result of very heavy assault operations. Furthermore, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the industrial zone was captured and secured by the Russians completely. But as for the micro district of Novo and this forest, the pro-Ukrainian sources show most of these territories as a contested area, which means that they don't have enough of information to determine whether these territories are under complete control of the armed force of Russian Federation or under complete control from Ukrainian side. If we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of January, we're gonna receive lots of videos of how the Russians were after withdrawing the Ukrainians in the southern part of the micro district by the name of Novo, which means that there were Ukrainians. We don't know for sure what is happening right now. Maybe the Russians managed to improve their positions and to force to fall back the Ukrainians further in the direction of the southern part of the city of Chasiv Yar. As for the city of Toretsk, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything from this area, just several videos that were published by the Ukrainian side of how vehicles and infantry fighting vehicles were heading towards the city, most likely with the purpose to reinforce the Ukrainian positions or maybe to evacuate wounded soldiers. We don't know for sure what is happening here, but most likely the Russians either have already finished the battle or about to finish. Now let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, and first we're going to talk about the N32 road. If you remember, several days ago the armed forces, the pro-Ukrainian sources published the video of how the Ukrainians were trying to repel Russian attack in the direction of this N32 road, and based on this picture that was published by the Ukrainian side, we have adjusted the map. And today on the 30th of January we got the video. The video was published by the Ukrainian side, and in this video we can see how the Russians were attacking this N32 road and how the Russians were physically entering this territory. I would like to point your attention to this episode. There is one road, there is another road, and this is exactly the territory where we have colored in Russian favor several days ago. So now we have 100% proof that indeed several days ago the Russians entered this territory and captured and cut physically N32 road. Ukrainians reported that later they managed to restore control over this territory, but without providing us any video or any geolocation that can prove it. So as for now, we are going to keep this territory in Russian favor, and let's see what is going to be next. Furthermore, there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Yelizavetovka. The Ukrainian sources published the video how they were filming the landing operation of the armed force of Russian Federation in this area. After this landing operation, the Ukrainians began bombing and attacking this territory. This video confirms that there are still very heavy clashes in the village of Yelizavetovka. Most likely the northern and the northwestern part of the settlement is under complete Russian-Ukrainian control, and as for the southern and the southeastern part of the settlement, this territory is under complete Russian control. As for the Pokrovsk direction, probably the most important updates are coming from this territory. The Russians managed to tighten the news around the village of Zelina for a little bit more. At least this information was provided us by pro-Ukrainian sources. And according to their maps, currently the village of Zelena was the territory in the village of Zelena can be split into the territory under complete Russian control and the territory in contested area. Most likely during the next 2 or 3 days, the village would be secured by the Russians completely, and then the Russians will begin offensive operation in the direction of Novoukrainka and Chunushine. The most important updates are coming from the area between Udachne, Salone and Kotlina from this triangle. Different sources during the previous night updated their maps in Russian favor. Pro-Russian sources, pro-Ukrainian sources reported significant breakthrough of the armed force of Russian Federation in the direction of the settlement of Udachne and in the direction of the settlement of Kotlina. So the Russians took under control every single tree line and fortified area in the southern direction from both settlements. As for pro-Russian resources, they reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to cut the road TO 406 Ukrainians physically. And these railways were cut by the Russians, and the Ukrainians lost one of the supply lines they used to have to support their forces in the city of Pokrovsk, which means that the battle for the villages of Novoalexandriivka, Uspenovka, Novosergeyevka, Udachne and Kotine and Pishane has started. This is very important operation for the Russians if they are able to take these territories under complete control and to force Ukrainians to fall back. This is going to be not just a significant breakthrough, this is going to be the biggest progress of the armed force of Russian Federation since the beginning of the battle for the city of Pokrovsk. And now let's move further. Another important update: the Russians improved their positions, and according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians also managed to enter the southwestern outskirts of Zverova. So they managed to get a little bit closer to the Pokrovsk itself. Now let's discuss the situation in the Kurakhove direction. After a very long period of artillery preparation on the settlement of Dachne, if we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of January, we're going to see a lot of updates, a lot of artillery strikes, a lot of explosions on the territory of Dachne, mainly on the eastern outskirts. The Russians have been bombing this territory for the entire month, and today, on the morning of the 30th of January, we got the first video that confirms that the Russians managed to improve their positions and to take the nearest tree line in front of this village itself. So the video was published by the 33rd Mechanized Brigade, and in this video we can see a lot of episodes of how Ukrainians were FPV droning the positions of the armed forces of Russian Federation. One of the episodes took place exactly in this area. So we can make a conclusion that the Russians are planning to attack the settlement from the southeastern direction. First, the Russians are planning to take this tree line and these facilities and then to enter the village itself. So today, on the 30th of January, the battle for Dachne has begun. Furthermore, the Russians moved their FPV drone focus further in the western direction. I'll remind you that since the beginning of January, the Russian FPV drones were flying above this territory, hunting and attacking Ukrainian vehicles between the villages of Konstantinopol, Andreevka, Ulakli, Dachne, Yantarne. There were a lot of updates from this territory. A lot of vehicles were destroyed in this part, but starting on the 30th of January, the Russians moved their drones further in the western direction, and now they have established complete FPV drone control over the main supply roads that are going to in the direction of Andreevka fortified area. During the previous 24 hours, we received a lot of videos of how the Russians were attacking and FPV droning Ukrainian positions, Ukrainian vehicles, Ukrainian forces with FPV drones on fiber optic technology. A lot of the Ukrainians suffered significant losses, and obviously this is the next FPV drone focused area. Now let's discuss the situation in the village of Velyka Novosilka. The Ukrainian sources published the video. The Ukrainians of 110th Mechanized Brigade published the video of how the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking with the use of FPV drones Russian units to the north of the settlement of Velyka Novosilka. One of the episodes took place here. Most likely the Russians were planning to take under control this barrack that is located to the north of Velyka Novosilka. This most likely the Russians were planning to use this territory as a checkpoint to establish better control over the supply lines and supply roads that go from Velyka Novosilka to the company's stronghold in the northwestern direction. Anyway, based on this video, we have adjusted the map, and now according to the geolocations, the distance between the edge Russian positions and the village of Velyka Novosilka itself is less than 1 kilometer from the north. So the news is tightening. The Russians are getting closer and closer to the settlement, and most likely the village, the defense of Velyka Novosilka will collapse in the very near future. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, show me Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.